My brothers and sisters, the Lord be with you.
And with you
A
too.
reading from the Good News of Jesus Christ according to St. John.
Lord Jesus.
Lifting up his eyes to heaven, Jesus prayed, saying, Holy Father, keep them in your name that you have given me, so that they might be one, just as we are one. When I was with them, I protected them in your name that you gave me, and I guarded them, and none of them was lost, except the son of destruction, in order that the scriptures might be fulfilled. But now I am coming to you. I speak this in the world, so that they may share my joy completely. I gave them your word, and the world hated them because they did not belong to the world any more than I belong to the world. I do not ask that you take them out of the world, but that you keep them from the evil one. They do not belong to the world any more than I belong to the world. Consecrate them in the truth. Your word is truth. As you sent me into the world, so I send them into the world. And I consecrate myself for them, so that they also might be consecrated in truth. The good news of our salvation.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
My sisters and brothers, as I have been reflecting on the readings of the liturgy today, a dear friend came to mind, and he just kept on coming back to me as I was reading each line, especially in the gospel text. And his name was Father Joe Dietz, and Joe died about a year or so ago. And I had taught Joe in the seminary, and Joe had gone into the seminary later in life, so he was well into his 80s. And so they were interviewing me in Catholic New York, and they're saying, well, Father Joe was 80-some years old, and you were his teacher. How old are you? I said, well, I'm 105. And so they actually published this in Catholic New York. So if you read that, it simply is not true, right? I'm not 105. But anyway, when Joe, he was diagnosed with a cancer that had moved very quickly through his body. And he was extraordinary because he was immediately ready to die. Immediately, right? He said something to the effect, well, you know, when the show is over, it's time to get off the stage, right? He was really ready. And the doctors said that he would go quickly because he was so very, very ready to embrace death. So Joe was really a very, very holy person in the best sense of the word. So a couple of weeks before he died, I was visiting with him, and he said to me, Tony, I'd like you to preach the homily at my funeral and to say the Mass. And he says, and the theme of the homily will be the wounded healer. So not only was he asking me to preach, he was telling me what to say when I got there, right? The wounded healer. And so Joe saw himself as a wounded healer. Why? And by the way, he taught very publicly about this. I'm not saying anything out of school. Joe was a recovering alcoholic, and he had been sober for well over 25 years. And he would just very, very freely share this with anybody that he met along the way. And as a result, because he was willing to share his own brokenness, he was someone who really helped a lot of people. He was so comfortable sharing his own brokenness and his own pain, it freed everybody else to do the same when they were with him. Joe was truly a wounded healer. And I want to suggest that that's what all of us are. We're called to be wounded healers. And Jesus is giving us a mission in this gospel text. And I want to propose to you, he's calling us to be wounded healers. In that, like Joe, we recognize our own brokenness, every single one of us. And so as we recognize our own brokenness and as we receive healing and freedom from God, well, that's what we bring to others. We indeed are called to be wounded healers. And so Jesus in the gospel text is saying, I'm sending you into the world. Now, as he describes the world in the text, it's not an easy place. He's saying you're going to be rejected and you're going to experience this, that, and the other thing, right? It's not an easy place. So the description of the world in John's gospel is that the world is a good place. The world is a place where we experience God's love, but just as we are broken and wounded, so is the world, and so is the cosmos. And so as we go about the world, as we're in touch with our own brokenness, we see the brokenness all around us. I'm often reminded of students who were moving onto this campus a year or two ago, and as they were moving in, this one kid was very upset, and so I see the mother saying, "This school is the best school in the whole world. They have the most delicious food. They have the best teacher, the best music." And she's going on and on along these lines. So this calms the kid down. So the kid came into my office a day or two later, and I looked at him and I says, "John, I got to tell you something. Your mother lied." There's no perfect place in this world, right? This is a good place, but like everything else in life, it is not perfect. Another way of saying it is there are no free lunches. And so Jesus is sending us into the world, a world that is broken, a good place, but indeed it's broken. But notice that he is consecrating us. Now, this is very important in the context of John's gospel. To be consecrated means that we are being blessed, but in a deeper way, it means we are being connected with God in a bond that cannot be broken. And so what he's saying is, I want you to have the same unity that I have with the Father, is what we hear him saying, that you have this same unity with the Father and with one another. And the way I like to look at this, it's a unitive consciousness. And this is important because as we go into the world that is so divided in so many different ways, right? Jesus is saying, I'm sending you forth with a unitive consciousness. What is a unitive consciousness? A unitive consciousness in the Gospel of John is that we see the connection between things. Everything in some way is connected. This is the mystical path. The mystical path is when you can connect the dots. You see that everything is united in some way. And really, it was what St. Francis of Assisi, for example, when he looked at water, he didn't see H2O. He saw sister water, recognizing that all of the elements are connected and are related in a very deep and irrevocable way. This is very different than a separative consciousness. So a separative consciousness would say that, we're divided politically, we're divided within the church, we're divided according to race, we're divided according to nationality, we're divided according to sexual orientations, and so on and so forth. And it was really the French anthropologist René Girard who said the basic human dynamic is scapegoating. And by scapegoating, he says, we want to always blame the other. So we have troubles because of the people from that country, or the people from that gender, or the people from that culture, or that race, or whatever the case might be, placing the blame on others. And what Girard says is that Jesus is the one, when he opened his arms on the cross, brought us all together. That indeed, because of Jesus, we are united. We are not separated from one another. Now, if the truth be known, obviously, as we go into the world, you don't experience it that way. You walk into a world that is very, very divided. And so into this very divided world, what Jesus is saying in this text, he's sending us forth with the unitive consciousness to do our best to try to bring it all together as best we can. Just several days ago, we celebrated Ascension Thursday. And what always comes to mind, I remember being in Sicily, actually, on Ascension Thursday. This goes back a few years ago. And they read the Gospel of the Ascension, in which Jesus is going back to the Father. And as they can only do in a place like Sicily, after they read the gospel, they had this statue of Jesus and they pulled the statue up on pulleys. And so Jesus now is going up, and I wanted to sing Up, Up, and Away as the statue was going up there, right? But when I saw this, what very much struck me, like we read in the Gospel on Ascension Thursday, what happens is we want to look up. We want to look up. And we read in the Gospel, don't look up. Don't look up. Look into the world. Go into the world. Don't look up. That's not the place where you find God. We find God in the midst of everyday life. And as we walk into the midst of everyday life, our role is to do our best to bring about unity. And so in the gospel text, we are given a mission. We're called not to look up. Jesus is sending us into the world. And he sends us into the world in a very, very special way, like my friend Father Joe. He sends each of us into the world as wounded healers.